Scott, let's get right into it. I have some questions for you about earning in Bitcoin, about the wage that people can earn in Bitcoin, and I want to show you a graphic. So if we look at Canadian wages in sats, the price history, we can see that it's just completely going down. Why is this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're thinking about sort of twofold, that we have the problem of wage stagnation in Canada, and we also have the problem of the exchange rate of the Canadian dollar in Sats, which over the last 3 years is kind of what would it would be down like. I mean, that exchange rate would be pretty grim. So I think when we're thinking about denominating wages in dollars versus Sats, it's a twofold problem. One is the plummeting exchange rate between Canadian dollars and Bitcoin, and the problem the Canadian employers are having in keeping salaries, having them keep pace with cost of living in Canada, which, as a Canadian, has been a total disaster. Cost of living in Canada has escalated in a way that's way higher than anything that's being reported in the mainstream media.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I've been, and I know you post on YouTube as well. You have your podcast. I have my podcast. Actually, just I was thinking about this a few days ago. I made a tweet about this where I said when you when you live in Canada and you get paid in US dollars, it's almost like you're getting a little bonus. You're
Yeah.
getting a bonus for getting paid in terms of a currency that's stronger, and it almost feels like, you know how people say you should work in a country where they have a strong currency, and then um, you should live in a country with a weak currency.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think that that's the comparison, like that I made in this tweet, and it's great that you can actually have this experience. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, so like, I get that obviously the US dollar features sort of has some aspects that Bitcoin doesn't that are preferable. It is more universally accepted. It is more stable, even though also priced in Bitcoin, the value of the US dollar exchange rate isn't that much better than the exchange rate of the Canadian dollar. But I would just sort of take that idea one step further. Like, why would you not want to earn the best form of money? Because then essentially, regardless of where you're living, you are doing that. You're able in your own country if you're earning Bitcoin in your own country, wherever you're living, you are earning a better form of money than the one you're forced to spend. And I think like you and I had this conversation on my podcast about the hybridization of saving and investing. Nobody can just purely save anymore, especially in countries that aren't using the US dollar, because currency debasement acceleration has just become such a problem. So the problem has become so deeply rooted in the way we think about accumulating money and preserving wealth that now we don't even really think about saving in the traditional sense anymore. All we do is find more and more creative ways to try and grow our money faster than it's melting. And you can basically eliminate a key part of that step if you're just earning money that doesn't need to be grown intrinsically, and converting that money into your local money that you need to spend to finance your daily, like your day-to-day life. Now you have a pathway to eliminating all those convoluted and creative strategies to grow money. I mean, really what we're trying to do with saving is just de-risk and preserve the money that you already have, preserve the wealth that you already have. So much of what we do has become that we would consider saving has really become gambling, and this is just a pervasive, kind of strategy that has really melted into all aspects of how we think about planning for the future. And it's because broken money prevents us from being able to plan for the future with certainty. Money that works well allows us to think long term and make long term decisions with our money.
Yeah, I think you made some really great points there. One thing that you said there was that uh, inflation is just so deeply ingrained in society now. We kind of just expect our costs to go up, and then what that does is, as you said, investing has become gambling. Investing, if you're buying real estate and you're getting a super low return, on your property, you're just expecting the property value to go up. You just
Mhm.
think that more and more people will buy that property. And actually, I was looking at so in the legacy financial system, people don't see this. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't see what the problem is. They have no idea really how money works, where money should be going, what it is, and they post content like this because it's just so normal. Some
Yeah.
inflation is a good thing. This tweet is just saying some theft is a good thing. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that is exactly how I would have phrased it. Some theft is a good thing. It's like, Mises said, made an analogy about money being melting chocolate, and it's like, what good comes from the value of your money being eroded away, so that you're forced to do something with it? No, I mean, like, I think the reverse. It's just, again, our entire financial society has been built on this bedrock of melting money. So we don't really have a way to think about it any other way. But this is the reason why we don't build the kinds of buildings that would last. You go to Europe and nobody wants to see the glass boxes that are being built. You go to see the cathedrals and old stone buildings that took 30, 40, 100 years to build, but were built to last 1,000 years. And the only way you could ever envision a construction project that grand would be if money was retaining. All of those buildings were commissioned and built during kind of gold standard times where money held value, so you could think about doing something based on quality. You could have businesses that ran based on, competing based on delivering a product, instead of, in the fiat world, as the value of money erodes continuously, everything needs to be done faster, cheaper, as margins continually get squeezed. And this goes back to the start of what we're talking about. And wages fall the same victim to this problem of, it's an operating cost, growing expense that's like impossible to stay in front of, because the money is just, as it accelerates in becoming worth less and less, it gets harder and harder to squeeze more juice out of the orange.
Yeah, and the people who are being taken advantage of, the people I guess, as you said, the juice is being squeezed out of, they start opting out because it's almost like a real life game of Monopoly. If the price just keeps going up, eventually you lose, right? In this game, the only way to lose is to pass away. That's the only
Yeah.
way. Like that's the only way to exit the game. Otherwise, you're stuck. You're playing it forever, and there's nothing that you can do to stop that from happening.
Yeah, and this idea of like planning for the future with certainty, like, I really think most people don't really. A lot of people want to be wealthy, but the broad majority of people really want to be able to enjoy their life, have meaningful relationships, have a family, contribute to society. It's not everybody's goal to be rich, but
Yeah.
in a operating in a society with a money system where the rules are constantly changing and getting harder and harder, yeah, of course you're going to start to see a broad mass of people become disaffected and start to want to opt out. Like, if the game's just too hard, then nobody wants to play. This is true when you're a kid. It's just as true when you're an adult. Like, it makes perfect sense to me. I was talking to a business owner yesterday who, in the Okanagan here, I'm in the interior British Columbia, and they own a bunch of commercial real estate properties. It's a side business to their main enterprise, and they've had problems retaining tenants because it's mostly office space. So these commercial real estate properties, which they thought were appreciating store of value, sort of side business, are now negative cash flow, and they're subsidizing the mortgages through the main revenue of the business, hoping that the value of the properties, which has also come down since they have purchased them, will come back, so that they can either exit that trade or at least start breaking even. And this is another example of, I think, the challenge sort of like legacy thinkers are going to have in applying old strategies for a rapidly evolving economy that hinges around this collapsing value of money.
Yeah, it's the whole all of society is basically has become high time preference. Everything is now high time preference. We we try to save our time by ordering food from Uber Eats. We try to save uh we try to save our time by spending money on things that we don't need. Convenience is everything now. The entire market is based on convenience, and it's all to help us save our time when we're really not doing so that we can work more, so we
Yeah.
can spend more of it working.
Yeah, I mean, and if you really think about what are you trying to do with money when you're earning money, you're converting your effort and energy into a monetary, like, this is a battery. You're trying to store that energy that you've converted into something that you can trade for other things when you need to consume them either now or in the future.
Yeah.
And if that battery works, then you don't need to continually trade more and more of your time. Uh, your battery stores that energy effectively, and you can turn that energy back into consumables when you need them. So this is a problem. It affects everything, right? You make content, it's short form content. People don't even watch long videos anymore. It's the 2-minute videos that people seem to really consume. And I think, like, another disastrous effect we can see in society that is totally going on is, in the high time preference society, we turn everything into a side hustle. So it's also the Uber deliverers who that's their side job. It's OnlyFans, like people are doing porn. That's a side gig. It's like you have to turn everything into a side hustle. Airbnb, you're turning your property into a hotel. All of these businesses are based around, like, creating extra time. Really is what we're trying to do, right? Is because money doesn't work.
And when we can create time out of thin air, it's not that we're creating time, we're stealing it from other people.
Yeah.
We're taking, like, real estate. The idea of real estate is pretty much to buy things that other people need and then rent them to those people so that they can pay for your lifestyle.
Yeah.
You're just transferring time from other people to yourself. That's the goal. I think that's one of the things that I personally feel will be the biggest change on a Bitcoin standard. We'll no longer see houses as money because we'll
Yeah, I
have a
mean,
form of money that
you
works.
really are, like, I think in real estate, and I feel the same. It's really important that we definancialize residential real estate, because it's just like bedrock of, like, it's a basic human need. Um, I think you're stealing people's, when house prices get bid up, and this isn't any one person. Like, nobody's guilty of this. This is the system, but this is how it works. As these asset prices get bid up, and people now are going to be enabled to go further and further into debt and take mortgage terms out that are longer and longer. So instead of, it was 5 years, mortgages were 5 years like 50 years ago. And then 20, 25, 35, 50 in the UK. So what are you really doing as these asset prices get bid up, and you're convincing someone else to trade more and more of their own lives for this thing that you're selling them? We're effectively, I'll steal my life from someone else, or say steal someone else's life, so that then they can steal someone else's life further in the future, when mortgages are 100 years and they go to sell that house in 30 years to somebody else. So it's like a Ponzi scheme of stealing people's time and energy, which is like, it's just really not supposed to be this way. And so I couldn't agree with you more, man. This thing has to change.
I think, just based on what you said, a Ponzi scheme of stealing people's time and energy. Once the people at the bottom, in a regular Ponzi scheme, once the people at the bottom run out of money, the Ponzi scheme collapses. The people who are supposed to be funneling more money into the system. In this case, I guess, once the people at the bottom run out of time,
Yeah.
run out of energy, the entire system collapses.
I mean, and you have to think we're already close, because, like, how much sense does it make to be entering into a mortgage that you're knowingly going to have to either not fulfill or pass on to your kids? And, like, yeah. So um, I think we're in this transition period where it is still a very normal idea. Most people kind of think that the pathway to financial freedom is by owning a home. When your home's paid off, then you have some time to maybe live in that home. when you've stopped working, and then eventually you'll sell that home, and that will be the money that you live on and maybe pass on to your heirs. Like this has been the way it's been for so long that I think this is another one of those things like inflation where people don't really question it. It's just sort of an accepted fact of how we think about planning for the future. But all of these things have to have a natural endpoint, because like any Ponzi scheme, like you said, when we run out of new participants coming in at the base level of it, the rest of the pyramid is going to have to collapse. I think we're close.
Yeah, and I think the change that could happen, I mean, it could be as small as people just refusing to work, refusing to support the system, refusing to. I think it's already happening. With, for example, people are buying, they're living in their cars.
Yeah, 10
They're
cities.
not. They're not.
10 cities in every city. You know, I think like, and you know, real estate is one of the most dishonest markets, because, you know, the people who are in that business, and this isn't a slight, you know, these are commission sales businesses where, you know, all you're going to ever hear from realtors is, you know, market's going to pick up soon. Buyers are coming back soon. You know, this is a great time. It's always a great time to buy. You know, things are that we've probably bottomed. It's, you know, the good time to get in now before it starts going up higher again. And yeah, I mean, the other thing I think that could really change it, and potentially already we're starting to see the start of it, is if there is a, you know, mass proliferation of AI in the workforce, that this is going to really potentially change the number of people who could be affording mortgages. And I do think that over the next, we'll call it like 18 to 36 months, AI will transform so many different business processes so quickly that it's going to be a like a tidal wave of downward pressure on mortgage. Like, you know, new mortgage application stats are already cratering. You know, where are the buyers going to come from? We can only immigrate so many people. In British Columbia, the number, and I think they're revising these numbers now, but the Premier David Eby was talking about the target they were given from the federal government was 430,000 people a year, and the second biggest city in British Columbia is Victoria, and that would be like around the size of Victoria. Like, so for one province to have to accommodate as many people as the second biggest city in the province every year it's just not going to work, right? We're not building houses fast enough to do it anyways. So you can see the cracks even in the concept of there's just no way this is going to work.
So we're not building houses fast enough, and then on top of that, the houses that are being built are being marketed to investors, and I always see it. More and more of them are saying, real estate investors welcome. This is great real estate investment property, excellent investment property, excellent growth potential. And that's just the point of building houses now, isn't to house people, it's to invest. It's to help people to continue the Ponzi scheme. I actually came across just what you were saying there. I had to find this tweet. I thought it was insane that this is the way that this is a realtor. Nothing against her. I have nothing against her. Don't give her any hate or anything. But I feel like this is the wide belief. This is the way that people think. She's a realtor. So it says this chart is being misinterpreted. The lack of transaction volume does not mean a housing price crash is coming. There's huge pent up demand. Huge pent up demand because sales are so low. People will ultimately buy, and as they come to terms with the fact that 4% rates are not coming back. Okay, so I think this is what she was referring to. This is the tweet. Breaking U.S. housing market. U.S. home sales on track for the worst year since 1995. And that's the belief and people genuinely believe that. Like, they don't think that prices could come down. They can't imagine it.
Yeah. I mean, and to take it a step further, like we do live in this like absurd reality where most people have onboarded the idea that's okay. Like, we're all okay with the price of houses going up forever, even if it puts us unbearable stress on society, because, you know, we all feel that this is the simplest way for things to march on forward. And, like, you know, it might not be ideal, but this is how it works. So the only choice we have is to get on board and start trading our life force for this stuff. And there is totally a different way. we start storing our energy, our monetary energy, in a vehicle that doesn't degrade over time, doesn't require tenants, doesn't need new kitchen and property taxes. It is an annual event. We just separate saving and gambling permanently. It's like, people talk with Bitcoin about separating government and money, but I think it's really about separating saving and gambling, and just
Yeah.
giving people an option to do something with their money that is simple and safe. And if people, and then that will introduce some free market dynamics. And if people still think that they can gamble on real estate and outperform the savings tool, great, go ahead. You're free to try, but everyone shouldn't be trapped and forced into that simply to try and participate. And I think, like, this thing about people don't believe prices can come down. I'm a big fan of the K-wave cycles, chondritive waves, which was sort of a Russian economist from 130 years ago, who was looking at long-term patterns of asset prices as related to sort of 60, 80-year cycles of credit accumulation and bust. And there is lots of long-term historical data around how technology and sort of defining innovations of eras creates inevitable lending to accommodate the adoption of that technology, and then the amount of leverage that the system can tolerate will hit a maximum, and this inflates the price of assets to a point where the market can't bear it anymore, and the cycle will start over. Nothing goes up forever only. Like, maybe house prices will resume a march upward in spite of what Bitcoin's doing over the rest of the century. But I think the odds of us seeing some kind of I'm not having a little bump, like a repricing, a correction. I mean, for me, I think with houses, functionally, if we remove this store of value component out of how we think about owning houses as being a reason for owning a house, then that is going to create an entirely new market dynamic and probably permanently change the sentiment of, there's a lot of negatives that come with owning a house. If you didn't have to own a house to think that you might be able to retire one day, then it becomes really more of a personal preference. Like, do you really want to have something that you're responsible for and you like the idea of decorating it in a way you like, all these things? That's cool. But it's not for everybody. I rent because for all these reasons, I think that my money is safer in Bitcoin, and I don't really care so much about all of the headaches that come with owning property. And I'm happy that my Bitcoin is vastly outperforming real estate it doesn't matter where you live. And I'll let somebody else have the headaches.
Yeah. And I just highlighted this comment here because this is the kind of way that investing in real estate makes us think. This is how it makes us think. It makes us think that the fact that people can't find houses to live in is actually a good thing because we profit from it.
Yeah.
And that's not, I don't think that's the right way to think at all. I think that's probably one of the worst mentalities that somebody could have, just putting other people at a disadvantage so that you can benefit. I mean, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, to your point, like, you can't print time out of thin air. So any kind of, like, the profits, they're coming from somewhere. And in this case, they come from the people that agree to pay an outrageous price for this thing that's been built, right? And if they can't do that and they end up on the street or living in their car, there's one way to look at this and say, well, that's not our problem, but it's totally our problem. Because if you're planning on living in that place where there's a growing number of people living on the street in their cars, this involves everyone. And like here, I live in Kelowna, BC. There is a huge and growing homelessness problem that is almost unsolvable because this is also a really desirable place to live, and it's a kind of a place where there's some perception of geographically like finite area, because Kelowna is a valley that it does have an actual limited amount of space. So there are only so many different levers that can be pulled, where in spite of all that, the market is going to be tied to the broader of what's going on in Canada with bigger markets and money printing and international buyers. All these things.
Yeah. Uh, so just I want to change topics a little bit. I don't know if you saw this, but Microsoft is planning to do a they're planning to have their shareholders vote on whether or not they should invest in Bitcoin. And do you have any thoughts on that? Any ideas on that?
Yeah, I did see that. I think either way, this is a really it's a big day for Bitcoin. When you
Yeah.
start to see the biggest companies even debating it, so whether they do it or not, I don't think it matters. I think Microsoft will also, they're going to survive either way. I did see, Michael Saylor talking about some great talking points about what the MicroStrategy's treasury has done and what an allocation for Microsoft could mean for the company and for the shareholders. And this is the thing, I think that um, if the Bitcoin thesis continues to be right, then it will be harder and harder for shareholders to not want to do it, and for decision makers to not be able to do it. So if MicroStrategy says no, that's fine. There's Apple and Google and Netflix and Chiquita Banana, and like there is really, we're in this position where there is one big company, possibly two, depending on what Dell Computers is actually doing. So there's room for everyone else. I mean, and there's only that Bitcoin's going to have to come from somewhere. So if at any point there is a mass adoption of a corporate treasury strategy, or this becomes a normalized use case for Bitcoin, it's again separating saving and gambling. You can see where this is going to go. I think like it's not hard to the same reason why a person would want to separate saving and gambling. This applies to companies too, right? Like companies sink all kinds of money into real estate, as an example, like the person I mentioned earlier, just trying different ways to diversify that capital inside the business and protect it using the strategies that have worked in the past.
Yeah, I think it really pushes companies to also think long term. It also
Mm-hmm.
pushes them to think about how they can continue working with a client, continue providing great services, great products for the long term, rather than thinking about how they can make a quick buck in the short term and be able to pay their interest obligations. Because a lot of companies right now are just massively in debt. I know a lot of companies that probably wouldn't survive if they weren't able to print money out of thin air. There would be no way that they could survive. I think there's companies that probably will disappear if they don't adopt a Bitcoin standard, because all of their operations are just focused on being able to pay the interest on their loans and to stay afloat.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and back to our earlier part in the conversation talking about currency risk, if we're thinking about the huge employers, huge Canadian companies, I'm guessing, but Lululemon probably doesn't today consider having to denominate their balance sheet in Canadian dollars as a massive risk to the company. But this is something I think is going to change over time as well. So many companies, I would say all the companies in the world that are existing today, headquartered outside of the United States, are operating with a secondary drag factor on their enterprise, which is melting money. So I don't think we're that far away from, and maybe it will first happen with, we see Microsoft say no, and you might see, a large employer in France or Bombardier, like these, there are plenty of global employers rooted elsewhere where somebody's the light's gonna go on, and this is the strangest thing about Michael Saylor, and MicroStrategy has been so bold and high profile, and he's been making these TV appearances, he'll take all the heat when Bitcoin crashed from 69 to 16. He's still on CNBC having his conviction, and it just doesn't appear that his C-suite peers at other sort of Fortune 500 companies are really paying attention to what they're doing, and which is just totally bizarre because during that same time, like the MicroStrategy stock has been one of the best performing uh, stocks available, and it looks great today, and they're like quadrupling down on their strategy. Like I'm personally amazed that it hasn't yet piqued the interest of any other large employers to do even a small take on what they've tried.
Yeah, and it actually surprises me that Canadian companies aren't on board yet because the Canadian dollar is so much worse. The
Mm-hmm.
Canadian dollar is the Canadian dollar is going to probably. Do you think the Canadian dollar could hit $2 Canadian for a dollar US? Do you think
I
that
think
could
it's going to
happen?
get worse.
Yeah.
Like my, yeah, I saw there was a report in the spring about 50 cents. I don't think 20 to 30 cents is out of the question because, um, I mean, for a lot of reasons. But
Wait. Can you clarify what you were saying there? 20 to 30 cents, 50 cents?
sorry, you're converting it the other way, $2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking
Oh
50
right.
cents US for a Canadian dollar. I think it
Oh
could
yeah.
be
Okay.
20 or 30 cents US for a Canadian dollar. Um, Yeah, I
Wow.
mean, and you think about the consolidation of different sectors in Canada. It's a much smaller economy. I mean, think about big finance, right? We sort of have the banks and the three insurance companies, and that's kind of like that. That is the financial sector of the TSX 60. Um, those companies are all heavily exposed to Canadian commercial real estate, and the big insurance companies in particular. And so, um,
Every financial institution is
yeah,
in Canada, especially. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So there is a really precarious intertwinement of this real estate Ponzi and bad money, and our local, and our domestic huge enterprises that are just so caught up in this web. So I'm really equally surprised. I can't believe a big Canadian company hasn't thought about doing this yet in a high profile way.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like a very smart decision. Even for individuals, Canadian individuals, I think Canadians will probably be a little bit faster to adopt Bitcoin than the US
Hmm.
than Americans because the Canadian dollar is losing value. If you go to the US, you're paying, like I said, 40 cents more for every dollar that you spend. So
Hmm.
for every dollar that you have in expenses, if gas is $4 a liter, you're paying $6 and $5.20, something along those lines. But you're paying significantly more, $5.60. You're paying significantly more because our currency is so much weaker, and that just blows my mind. So more people need to adopt this thing, more Canadians especially, because Canada has, I mean, it's becoming a very weak currency, and eventually I think it will keep getting weaker unless I guess the US eventually, if something happens where there's a collapse. But I mean, I would assume that Canada's Canada probably wouldn't be much better off, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think you can see it the other way. The fiat way of thinking is the Canadian real estate has been a hotter market, and our prices have gotten higher, so there have been more rewards. But I think of it the other way. U.S. real estate prices haven't appreciated in the same way because of their citizens haven't had to view houses as money in the same way because
Mhm.
their money has performed its function as money much better than the Canadian dollar has. So, we've seen the hyper financialization of assets happening in Canada at a much faster rate. We've normalized this. So it's not just that the exchange rate is worse. Our money actually goes a lot less far here because it is sort of factually like performing the duty of being money much poorer. We have to turn everything in Canada into something else because I think the M2 in Canada has, on average, since 1970, um, grown between 8 and 9% a year. So that means like
Wow.
the total amount of Canadian dollars is doubling, like less than a decade. Every decade, there's more than twice as many Canadian dollars. So
every 7 years, every
of
8 years or
course,
so.
the money's not working. They're doubling the
Yeah.
money supply every decade.
But see, I feel like if Canada were to adopt Bitcoin, the country is amazing. Like if you've traveled to certain which area are you in? You're in Vancouver
The
or BC?
Okanagan, South Central BC.
BC, yes. Okay, okay. It's a great area. I
Yeah,
wish people would go there and travel. I went there for the first time last year, and it was awesome. It was a great experience. And I feel like Bitcoin could actually fix all the problems that we have. Right? A lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
people.
yeah. I mean, it's Canada has like it's like it's a giant corporation operated by a handful of cartels. Realistically, well, we should be, nobody in Canada should be paying any tax. We should be as wealthy as any of the resource producing countries in the Middle East that offer those same benefits to their citizens, because we have such a diverse and rich deposit of natural resources in Canada. We do have a smaller population. It's a big area, but and I think people kind of we complain about the cost of living here, but again, most people are, I think, not that unhappy with how it's gone, without really thinking about how much better it really could be. Some of these places in the world, I think, you're seeing it's not quite as bad in Canada as it is in the US, with falling behind on public infrastructure projects and being able to sort of like just maintain the standard of living here. But with the amount of wealth that just comes out of Alberta alone, we should be like it should be like a Dubai of the North. We should have an incredible amount of prosperity here. So maybe Bitcoin could fix it.
So wait. You said we shouldn't be paying income taxes. How are we going to build the roads then? How's that even possible?
Yeah, I
What do-
mean, like there
what
were
do you
roads
propose?
there were roads in the U.S. before there were income taxes, and schools and hospitals. These are the
Yeah,
things like uh, all of these ideas, and this is part of, I think, why people get so disaffected, why the problem is so significant. Is it's not just that the money is getting worse and performing its duties uh, more and more poorly. It's that at the same time, the percentage of that money that the government is looking to take is growing, right? Like
yeah,
um, income taxes started at whatever it was, 2%, 5%. These things creep. When now we're one of the most heavily taxed countries in the world. Um, there is always talk about, and it's multifaceted, right? Because if the city you're living in needs to raise city taxes, they're not, these things are, it's undemocratic, right? The assumption is taxes will go up. It's the rate at which they go up is what we debate. Nobody's debating
yeah.
like truly permanently lowering them or getting rid of them. And so the piece of the pie that is being taken from us has to grow, while the amount we get to keep goes shorter and shorter distance all the time. Like even that one thing is like what is the lifespan on this kind of arrangement? Like how can people possibly feel like they are being treated fairly?
Can you talk more about where the money is actually going? Of course, we're getting taxed like crazy. We're getting charged all these massive rates of taxes. I mean, they actually they were proposing to include. So right now you have to include 50% of your capital gains into your income. They were the I think Chrystia Freeland, is that her name? She was proposing that you now have to include 66%. So
Mm-hmm.
the gap between investing, returns from investing, and returns from working is closing, meaning that there's a smaller incentive to invest, and there's a bigger incentive to work for a company. Are any thoughts on how
Yeah,
that
so
could also occur?
it's like they're creating the situation where you're forced to gamble your money. And then now
Yeah,
they're saying, if you're successful in gambling your money, we're going to penalize you further for your success. And so these are all just things. I think ultimately, you just see capital flow elsewhere, and like they can make it. That's not accessible for the average person as it is, say, for a large corporate. But we are seeing in Canada There's Tim Hortons. There's been lots of companies, right, be sort of blasted publicly in the media for outsourcing labor and bringing in temporary foreign workers and sort of like doing what they can just to work within the parameters that are being dictated by public policy. We have so many problems. Where does the money go? I mean, the ArriveCan app, which was commissioned by the federal government in 2020 or 2021, whatever that was supposed to cost $80,000. It ended up costing $60 million with no audit on any one of the So it's I think honestly, it's rampant corruption. There's no transparency. We have no ability to actually audit civil servants, and this is just how it is. So yeah,
It's gone from a situation where they're supposed to serve us into a situation where we're serving them, where we're the we're the servants instead of them being the servants. We're the civil servants now. We have to provide everything that we do to them. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, because I don't know if you saw this, but Canada was they had a survey for a CBDC not too long ago, maybe about a year ago or so. I don't. Do you think that could happen faster than the U.S. or what are your thoughts on that?
I'm really not personally all that worried about CBDC just because,
No.
yeah, I think that personal. I mean, and I could be wrong, but my personal opinion is that we're in the end stages of countries being able to issue their own currency, and it's because I think people don't understand how difficult it is to prevent people from passing Bitcoin from one wallet to another. It's next to impossible to prevent a Bitcoin transaction between when it's held in a non-custodial way. And so if there's one money that we have to use or else, and that money melts in value and becomes worth less every single day that you hold it, and there's another form of money that relative to door number one retains its value or appreciates over time and gives you the ability to spend it when you want and how you want. And even if there is penalties or taxation or reporting requirements around that thing, I think generally speaking, technologies get adopted because they make your life better, they make your life easier, and people want freedom. They want to be able to enjoy their lives. So this whole thing with CBDC, I think, like, if we really get to a place where there is some kind of like hard crackdown on freedom money and we're herded or forced into using sort of surveillance slave money, at that point it becomes pretty difficult to maintain the illusion that we're living in a free country, or you're going to all of a sudden sort of shotgun a lot of people who are fence sitting around the state of the country. So I think that CBDC is a little bit of like it's a looming cloud, the possibility of it. I do think that mostly money is already digital anyways, so there's been a lot of positioning around how this is inevitable. But truly, I think what's inevitable is, in 20 or 30 years, however long it takes to get there in between, we will tell our grandkids about how countries all used to issue their own money. And there was like 170 different forms of money in the world, and they all worked differently, and they only worked inside your own political jurisdiction. And everywhere you went, things had different prices, and we had to always work through banks to convert one money into another money. It would take a week to send money somewhere else in the world. Like these are Stone Age, these are like ideas really from the 20th century that don't have any place in the information age. Like it's not a permanent technical innovation for Canada to move its money to a digital ledger, so that you would still have to turn it into a digital euro if you wanted to use it somewhere else in the world. Like this is just not where it's going. People don't understand how powerful the innovation of a form of money that no one is in control of, being the native payments protocol and currency of the internet, and as we move towards a civilization where everything occurs on the internet. Like it's going to be very, very difficult for central banks to issue their own currencies as a tool of control and policy, and have people actually want to use those things when the price of using that thing is your own time and energy. No way.
Yeah, and then the crazy thing is we have to get all these different currencies, and the banks make a profit from exchanging them because they don't want to take the risk of holding it in case that other currency loses its value. So let's say they hold the euro and you want to exchange it to Canadian dollars. You have to first, I believe you have to first give them your Canadian dollars, they exchange it to US dollars, then they exchange it to euros,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is just nuts. That doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah, so and I actually think it won't even be individual citizens that trigger this. It'll be the corporations that we've been talking about earlier, because they're the ones
Yeah.
with the actual lobbying power, and countries do care. You know, if Amazon comes to Canada or not and creates X number of jobs or not, it does matter. And in a global economy, the pressures and challenges of operating in multi-currency jurisdiction is something that also is an idea from the 20th century that is kind of like legacy. Like we are still in this awkward transition time where this is how it works. But you know, imagine when Microsoft understands that they can run their entire global business on a Bitcoin standard, and what that will actually mean for their ability to operate all over the world. They're not going to have to vote on whether or not they want to hold in their treasury. They're going to have to make decisions around what are the circumstances that would cause them to want to still own some US dollars, and why. And like, this is going to be flipped very quickly, and all of a sudden big companies are going to be looking at central banks for, you know, what are going to be the incentives. Like, if you want me to denominate our balance sheet in Canadian dollars, like what kind of breaks are we going to get for us to do that? Because I think, like, you know, in today's world where fiat currencies have a captive market, there isn't really any negotiating power on the part of the users. But as soon as that changes, there's going to have to be a rejigging of the incentive mechanism. Like, you can't keep devaluing this money and expecting me to, you know, have my company based in your country.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going based on everything you said there, you said Amazon bringing jobs to Canada. I want to again make a little pivot here. Um, I don't think that I think this actually connects with everything that we're saying. We're talking about jobs. We're talking about careers. Governments try to work and create jobs for us. They promise us, oh, 300 jobs, 500 jobs, 5,000 jobs, 5 million jobs, whatever. I don't think there's a job shortage. I think there's a shortage of entrepreneurs. I think there's a shortage of people who actually want to create businesses and create value. Everybody is risk averse, so they want to work a job, but that's not how reality works. And I think the market is self-correcting right now. The minimum wage, as we all know, the real purchasing power of the minimum wage is dropping, meaning that there's less of an incentive for people to work for minimum wage. And as that real value of the minimum wage keeps dropping because there's an excess number of workers, there's so many workers, so why would minimum wage have to go up? Minimum wage can honestly just stay, it can keep moving sideways. In the US, I think it hasn't been moved in like 15 years. In Canada, in Ontario, they keep changing it, they keep increasing it. At this point, it's at $17.20. So I think that's part of the reason why Canada doesn't have as many jobs, because they don't have businesses. There's
Yeah.
such a massive incentive for people to work for minimum wage that why would they start a business? Because if you think about it, it took me, so for my social media, I've been doing this for what, 3 years now. It took me 2.5 years to start making minimum wage from my when you do it right, when you don't sell crappy products, when you don't try to push people into Ponzi schemes and altcoins, then it's going to take time. But
Mhm.
after you get to that minimum wage, it starts accelerating. But the minimum wage is set so high, it took me 2.5 years. If it weren't for my wife supporting our finances, then I wouldn't be able to take this risk, right? And think about how many people can't take that risk. They just
Mhm.
can't. I think Canada is becoming that place where it's becoming worse and worse to start a business. And then on top of that, we have the capital gains, all the money that's being taken by governments and just spent on useless garbage. And what are your what any input on that part on
Yeah,
what you're saying there?
like, I guess there's 2 points I think I would make. First is, one, I don't think the government should be creating any jobs. The government doesn't create any wealth. They
Yeah.
transfer wealth from the productive companies that have good ideas, and they they take that capital and allocate it in their own way. By people who have the opportunity to do that, not because they've been good at something, but because they've claimed the right to do that. So I think should be another thing that Bitcoin probably fixes, because all of that only exists because of government having a never-ending ability to grow the percentage of everyone's wages and income that's being like collected. The second thing about minimum wage, to me, minimum wage and rising minimum wage is another one of these absurd fiat ideas that nobody really just stops and think about how crazy it is. Because what minimum wage really is a reflection of the ongoing devaluation of money. This is the same reason why a Big Mac was 99 cents in 1979 and it's $8 today, or whatever the actual numbers are. I don't eat at McDonald's. But what minimum wage really is like a measurement, a barometer of what is the minimum amount of this piece of paper you can earn to survive. So if we had a form of money that worked and retained its value, then you wouldn't ever need minimum wage to go up. Like, this should be something that stops that entire idea in its tracks. So it's impossible to well, it's not impossible, but absolutely it makes growing a labor force very difficult when your minimum labor costs input has to go up over time because the money can't fulfill its function.
Yeah, and over time, it just keeps getting worse and worse, and over time, we're seeing that the people who are working for minimum wage, as you said, it's supposed to be the minimum. Well, I mean, the idea is that's the minimum amount that you need to earn to have a sustainable standard of living. But now it's becoming that the people who are earning minimum wage have to do 1.5 jobs, 2 jobs, 2.5 jobs. They need to work overtime. Then they need
Mm-hmm.
to They need to go to their second job. Living on minimum wage is next to impossible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not possible, even if the wage just keeps going up. So right now in Ontario, it's $17.20 per hour. I think one of the other problems with this is that small businesses can't scale. They can't hire. They can't grow, and it gives these massive companies just a massive advantage because they can actually keep they have these customers who are going to go to them no matter what. Like Walmart has customers that they're going to go to Walmart no matter what, even if the price is 50 cents higher, 75 cents higher. People are going to still go. It just gives them that purchasing power over labor.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a huge problem. It's a problem for communities. To your point about minimum wage, like $17 an hour, if a 1-bedroom apartment is $2,200 a month, your $17 an hour isn't even going to cover like, you still have to eat and probably travel yourself back and forth to work so that you can earn that money. Like, the entire equation is broken.
Yeah, and we go right back to the Ponzi scheme where this has gone from a money Ponzi scheme to a time and energy Ponzi scheme. And
Yeah.
the people who are earning minimum wage, they're running out.
Yeah. Yeah, and the number of people that fall into that is growing, right? Because,
Yeah.
like, it's not that long ago, I would say, because the average wages also haven't really moved in Canada. But I would say, sort of subjectively, I kind of entered the workforce in Canada. I graduated university in 2004, and sort of like a normal starting wage then was 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 was like a really good number if you're a university graduate coming into any kind of a role. Today, those are still pretty normal starting wages, and so that's 20 years. The difference is 20 years ago, you could experience a pretty good standard of living, and probably even have a single income family supported on that income. And now you would have two people doing that, and really struggling to make ends meet. Like it's this, yeah, it's a structural challenge that is, I think, going to push our country to the brink.
Yeah, and it shows us that we're working more, but we're getting less.
Mm-hmm.
We're struggling more to.
And I
Go
think
ahead.
that one of the problems, and we'll see this whenever it plays out, but we can't vote our way out of this, because
Yeah.
regardless of who gets to make a decision around a federal budget, like the money printing is like when you dilute Kool-Aid. Once you've added too much water, the Kool-Aid just doesn't taste as good, right? And
Yeah.
so things aren't going to get affordable again. Like that's not how it's going to work, and we're not going to see prices return to what we're used to. So it's a one-way street, and compounding works the same way for investing as it does for debt repayment. And our federal government is so indebted that, and it's the same problem is happening in the U.S., where the escalating cost of servicing the debt that already exists on its own is going to make it like a massively uphill battle for whoever wins the next election. It won't matter, because that pile of money that is owed already, there's only two options, right? You can either sort of print money to nominally devalue the debt that already exists, or you can default. And either one of those roads isn't going to be good for you or I or any other sort of average citizen just trying to plan for the future with certainty.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're near the end of it. I wanted to ask you, any last input on this? Any last words of advice for my audience here?
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening, if you're working in a job, this is why we haven't talked about Block Rewards. The CEO of Block Rewards, we are a Canadian company trying to normalize earning Bitcoin in the workplace. And it starts really simple by taking a tiny amount of your paycheck. If you're listening and you are working, earning Bitcoin as a source deduction, this is the easy way to start. If you are operating a business, think about using Bitcoin as a way to solve your labor cost problems. And if you're listening and you don't understand how that could work, or you're interested and you want to have a conversation and learn more, reach out. You can find me. You can find me online. I'm active on LinkedIn. I'm active on Twitter, and you can find me at blockrewards.ca.
Awesome. I'll link your Twitter in the description below. Thank you so much for your time here, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Bye for now.